Welcome, everybody. I am here with Katie Kimball talking about avoiding chemicals in sunscreen. Summer is coming. This is a big topic about sunscreen, and we are here today learning from a pro about chemicals in sunscreen. So, welcome, Katie.
Well, thank you so much. I totally geek out on this subject, so just be ready for all the information.
I love it. And you have a lot of things that you are involved with. You're the national voice of healthy kids cooking. You are a blogger since 2009 at the Kitchen Stewardship, helping families stay healthy without going crazy. And as part of your life, you and your 4 kids and your pale skinned husband have personally tested over 120 different sunscreens, personally tested them. So she's got a reputation as the Wikipedia of sunscreen, which I love that. So an honest source of reviews in the natural living world. And as far as I know, you are the only person out there testing these sunscreens, which I absolutely appreciate, love, and so excited to share this information because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So let's get going. How did you first get interested in natural living in the first place?
Yeah, it's just been a crazy passion project as far as sunscreen goes. I was, as a kid, like in 5th grade, my favorite book was 50 Ways Kids Can Save the Earth. So I was always sort of like interested in that environmentalism idea and being a good steward. And it was a small part of my life, right? And now it is a huge part of my identity. Just we are a family who uses reusable water bottles. We're the family who picks up litter. Like, it is part of our family culture that we care for the earth. And 10 years ago, so my oldest just turned 16. So 10 years ago, I had gone through the phases of being a young mom knowing nothing. And get this, T, literally when we put on his clothes, when Paul was a toddler, I would put on sunscreen, chemical sunscreen, kills me to say it, every single day, every single summer morning, right with his clothes. That was part of our routine. And because I didn't know any better. I thought it was super important to avoid cancer, put the sunscreen on, Like, that was, he knew all these baby signs. It was one of his favorite baby signs. He'd sign the sign for go outside and put on sunscreen and put on my hat, right? 1-year-old, couldn't even talk. And so that was me keeping my kids safe, in air quotes, right? But then as I began digging deeper into sort of the natural living and non-toxicity and personal products and all that stuff, when, Paul was probably 4 and 5 and I was beginning to blog at Kitchen Stewardship, I realized that the wool had been pulled over my eyes, and it was time to completely ditch all the chemical. I mean, I threw them all away, switched to zinc oxide based sunscreens, and then discovered that my kids looked like Casper the Friendly Ghost every single day, right? That's a problem. And so it was 2010, and I looked at EWG at the time had only 40 sunscreens that they rated safe.
EWG is Environmental Working Group. I just want to make sure in case somebody's listening. Okay.
Yes, thank you. And so, they now have hundreds upon hundreds, 10, 11 years later. But in 2010, they only had 40. And I had this weird idea, like, what if I could get my hands on all of them and test them out for other parents out there, so that, all the parents don't have to go through this, like, guess and check, like, oh, that one's horrible, this one goes on like whiteout drying. And I did that summer. I got my hands on 28 of the 40, and that began a very strange 10-year journey of consistently testing sunscreens every summer.
That's so interesting. Do these companies now send you their sunscreen?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Yeah, I do. I get a lot of free samples, and then sometimes I purchase them. Sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I'm spending $10 on my, 100th tube of sunscreen. Like, I don't need this, but other moms need me to do this.
That is so great. It's great. It's funny. It's a great story, but it's wonderful that you're doing it for all these people out there and all these moms, but that you found that there are so many sunscreens out there that have so many toxic, harmful chemicals, carcinogens in them, that they're spraying on their kids and smothering them. But you tested them for them, and you found some great products that you can recommend. And I know on your website, I'll put on the show notes where they can get the results because they're on your website.
Yep.
But how do people decipher? How do they know between what do they know what do you recommend they look for? I know there's bad ingredients and good ingredients, and what do you recommend?
Super important distinction that I've tested 120 natural mineral based sunscreens, right? I'm not just testing like from the whole pool, because I don't care about most of the pool, because I believe that they're hurting our children, they're hurting our coral reefs, they're hurting our ecosystem.
Right.
And when you get into natural living, like it seems like there's so many rules. Oh my gosh, how do I figure all this out? What I love about sunscreen is it's so easy. It's actually really, really easy. All you have to do is look at the active ingredients on your tube. And if it says zinc oxide and nothing other than zinc oxide, there is like a 97% chance that that is going to be a rock solid, non-toxic option, right? It's easy. One ingredient, that's all you look for. If it says anything else, now maybe like titanium dioxide is the other mineral active. I don't think it is as desirable as zinc oxide for a couple of reasons, and we can go into that. But I mean, that's why it's just so easy for parents. Like zinc oxide, okay, titanium dioxide, sort of. But like if you see anything else in the active ingredients, put it back, put it down, don't order it.
So my understanding is zinc oxide, the sun hits it and goes off of it, whereas all these other chemicals that are in sunscreen soak into your skin and avoid, so the skin is soaking them in, and so the sun goes into, right? They
sure, yeah. We'll do a little science geek training
help
here.
me.
So,
yeah.
All of the chemical actives, and there are quite a handful that are approved in the United States and some in other countries. Avobenzone, oxybenzone, octinoxate, octisalate. Doesn't really matter what they're called; they're all terrible. They all work via a chemical reaction. So if we can take our brains back to high school chemistry, right? Chemical reaction, there were these equations that we all hated. And in the end, there's byproducts, right? There's no chemical reaction that doesn't like do anything. So what happens is the chemical actives in, petrochemical sunscreens are on and seeping into your skin, right? Very key. The sun is hitting it, and the active ingredients interact with the sun and cause a chemical reaction, right? So that is, yes, breaking down the rays of the sun so that they don't impact you as much. However, there are byproducts, and those byproducts are carcinogens. What? They're free radicals, right? This is, we eat our blueberries to have antioxidants. Well, the byproducts of the chemical reaction between the sun and the chemical sunscreen are oxidizing your cells. And that's cancer causing. So is it any wonder? I mean, I look at this stat and I go, yeah, totally makes sense. Melanoma, skin cancer, right, has increased 81% since 1973. And if you look at the, a graph of like use of sunscreen use has increased since the 80s, basically. Other skin cancers are up 71% since 1994. And again, sunscreen use and SPF numbers continue to get higher and higher and higher every year in the last few decades. So what we're doing is not working. And
what is exactly
probably causing the problem?
What do you say? I'm sorry.
I would say the increased sunscreen use and the increase in SPF numbers is part of the problem, is causing more skin cancer.
I am agreeing with you. And, for people, if you understand about these ingredients, it's important to know this, because now that zinc oxide, now that zinc oxide is okay. Now, some people think zinc oxide, I'm going to walk around. I know I've bought some before and I'll never use it again, because you look like you're like the lifeguard nose,
Yep.
like you're painted with white. So let's talk through how people can avoid that.
Sure. I mean, brands are getting so much better at their formulas now, where the zinc is dispersed more evenly throughout the formula. And so, yeah, so zinc, we talked about the chemical sunscreens soak into the skin. And so, of course, there are other issues with that. We should talk about that too, because it's not just, oxidizing. But the zinc oxide sits on the surface of the skin. So that's really important. We know the skin is our largest organ, and what we put on it, we're putting in our body, but not so with zinc oxide. And it's white. It's a white mineral, right? It's literally a mineral. You could, it's like a rock found in nature. And so that's the risk, right? Aesthetically, that's the risk of, you don't want to look like an alabaster statue because you have this little white powder on you. But that's why I test them. right? And I rate them based on how statuesque versus how normal you look. And I can show you a couple options. So
Yes.
one thing that brands do to help you not look like Casper the Friendly Ghost is they tint their sunscreen. So the one I'm holding right now happens to be from Earth Mama. It's a face sunscreen, and it's a little stick, which PS for parents who hate applying sunscreen to their kids, the sticks are amazing because they're really quick and they don't run everywhere, right? So that's
Love
super good,
that.
especially for faces. I still recommend lotion for arms just because it's too hard to get coverage. But they're tinted. So you can find many, many, many tinted versions, both in sticks and creams and tins, where that little bit of tint counterbalances the bit of the white cast that you might get with zinc oxide. Now, other brands, Maelove is one, Maelove, that does a really good job. I couldn't find that tube because we literally have like 70 of them in my house. They do a really nice job of integrating that zinc oxide into their formula. And here's, unfortunately, it does get a little complicated. Some brands use nano-sized zinc oxide. So this is less than 100 nanometers in size. And that actually does get a little bit sketchy as far as can that then sink into the skin and get into the bloodstream and cause some issues. So I do try to stay away from nano size. That's one of my litmus tests, where if you've used nano size zinc oxide, you're not going to get on my top recommended list.
Interesting. So the you're bringing up brands I've never even heard of before. And I thought I knew a lot about sunscreen. Obviously, I don't know a ton because you have just brought up some things that are so great, because I love sharing this information with people. So the sunscreen landscape has changed quite a bit in the past
Yes.
10 years since you've been testing. What have you noticed?
What have I noticed has changed?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's more and more brands are getting into the scene, and even some of your big national sunscreen brands are starting to make mineral formulas. It's good and bad. Okay, really, really good because competition makes everybody better. You know, it raises the bar, and so there are so many more choices that I can honestly say we've tried 120. There's only about a dozen in my top recommended list. That's elite, and I can do that because I can say, you know, this formula goes on great, but you'd have a couple ingredients that I just don't love. So like you can't make my top recommended list. Or like, you know, this formula is like perfection. You know, you could eat this stuff stranded on a desert island, but it's a little hard to go on. It's separated after the winter in my closet. Like you can make my second tier. So it allows you to be like more exclusive and find really, really great ingredients. Now, the negative side, especially of the big brands getting in on it, is that now we have greenwashing to deal with, meaning that the bottles and tubes and boxes have words on the front that make well-meaning individuals, well-meaning consumers like you and me think, oh, I have found a mineral sunscreen. I have found something that's safe. But the problem is that especially when you get to the bigger national brands, they tend to mix the mineral sunscreen ingredients with the chemical sunscreen ingredients so that they can put natural on the front or mineral on the front. So we have to be very, very careful. We have to be informed consumers. Always flip over the tube, box, bottle, whatever you're picking up, and read those active ingredients, because there's a ton of greenwashing going on. Sometimes, I mean, I take pictures all the time in the stores because I'll see the huge kiosk, you know, and you've got all the junk, all the sprays, all the chemicals. And then there'll be the little section of like natural, and they make it look so good, and they decorate it with green and earthy tones, right, to like settle our hearts. And then I start flipping over the tubes, and it'll be 3% zinc oxide and 18% 6 other chemicals, and I'm like, oh, like this is killing people. And it totally tricks people. We went to Hawaii right before the world shut down for COVID, just barely got this trip in. We were going snorkeling, and the snorkel boat captain was checking people's sunscreen. Like they're close to the coral, right? Like they understand the problem, and he would not allow any sunscreen on his boat other than zinc oxide only. And so this one couple, he said, you need to put that away. I'll let you use like they had a huge bottle of sunscreen. And they were like, what? We looked this up on Amazon. It said reef friendly. He said, yeah, there's no regulation on the words reef friendly. It's got one good ingredient, but it's got 4 bad ones. You have to put that away. And I felt so badly for them, but I also thought this is exactly why I do what I do, right? Because people have to be informed. It used to be 10 years ago, if something said reef safe or reef friendly, 100% chance it was amazing, at least in like non-toxicity. Didn't always work, didn't always go on great, but at least it was going to be non-toxic. But now those words are being thrown about like candy. And so we have
Yes,
to be more careful.
right. And the reef friendly, I know Hawaii passed that law a few years ago that they are that it has to be reef friendly sunscreen. Hopefully other states will pass that law too, because
Yes.
obviously these chemicals are coming off of your skin and going into the ocean, and they're harming our fish and harming the reef. So for
Right.
people that
It's
don't
projected we're going to
understand,
lose 50% of our reefs in the next, like I think it's 10 years. I mean, we are at the very beginning of being able to solve this problem or completely trash the coral reefs. Like they are dying. Hawaii's bill, just to do a quick 2-minute overview, it just went into law January 2021, actually, because they had to give brands a couple of years to catch up. So even though it was passed in 2019, it was instituted in January 2021. It bans 2 chemical ingredients, oxybenzone and octinoxate. Those are the 2 that were most clearly shown by research to be killing the coral reefs. Now, there are many more chemical ingredients that harm both humans and corals. It just hasn't quite been proven yet, although there's already research now in 2021 coming out about a few more. And so the ban in Hawaii is just that you cannot sell, buy, or bring or use oxybenzone and octinoxate in Hawaii. So it's good. It's a great step. And places like Key West and Palau have some legislation in place to start to ban these ingredients, but we still need more. We still need more ingredients banned. We still need more locales to do this work.
I 100% agree with you. That's interesting. It just went into effect. And that's why you read your labels. And that's why we have you here with us today, giving us your insight and the ones that you recommend. So what do people look for? How do they can go to your website, but they need to, is it just zinc oxide that they look for when they look at the ingredient list? Is it anything else that they should be paying attention to?
Right. I mean, in my book, if it's zinc oxide only in the active ingredients, it's going to be great. Now, if you want to start to drill down, I mean, there's obviously other ingredients, right? And there could be chemicals like parabens. There could be preservatives that are less than savory. So, I mean, I always avoid parabens because they're endocrine disruptors, right? I have 3 boys and 1 girl. They're all very little. Some of them are currently going through puberty. Like I really want grandkids. Like this is a golden life for me. And so there's no way that I want to put hormone disrupting chemicals like parabens on my kids, which actually brings me to another reason. I mean, we talked about carcinogenic cancer causing oxidation that happens with the chemical reaction between the sun and chemical sunscreen ingredients. But these sunscreen ingredients, particularly oxybenzone, one of those that I just said was banned in Hawaii for killing coral reefs, is a massive endocrine disruptor. Oxybenzone is found in 94% of American human like blood and urine. So it is persistent, it is pervasive, and it mimics estrogen. It makes I've had a chemist tell me, 1 full body application on a bikini clad woman of conventional petrochemical sunscreen is equal to a daily dose of estrogen hormone replacement therapy.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
that's going into that woman's body. That's washing off that body into our water supply, and water filters are not well equipped at all. Definitely city water filtration is not getting out these endocrine disruptors and these hormone mimickers. And it's scary. It's scary. I mean, we have a huge increase in infertility in the world. We don't know why,
And
but I think this is the
sperm
reason.
count is way down.
Mhm.
So you're not just talking women's endocrine, you're talking men's too. And I'm so
Oh, for
glad
sure.
you brought that up, because these endocrine disruptors, and they're not only in sunscreen, they're in so many other products. So it's about reading your labels. I'm always saying, read your labels and know your ingredients. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because the young children, the girls, the boys, slabbering on this suntan lotion and what it could be doing to their organs and their endocrine cycles. So thanks for bringing that up. Now, on a positive note, I like to go out there and get tan. These days, everybody's talking about getting vitamin D because it helps boost your immune system. What about getting a tan? And getting enough vitamin D. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, this is quite a balance. And may I preface by saying I'm a mom and a researcher. I am not a medical professional. I don't have any letters after my name. So we're just chatting over the backyard fence, people. Okay. So, take my knowledge or leave it. Clearly vitamin D is important. We know it can be supplemented, but it's not as effective. It's not as good. We get vitamin D naturally through the sun. So how do we get the right amount so we're not burning to a crisp, right? So that we're not impacting our cells with the sun, but yet we're still getting vitamin D. Many experts say that you want to get like about 15 minutes. And this varies, by the way, based on how pale your skin is. So a very like pale Irish redhead maybe only needs 5 or 10 minutes, whereas someone who's real olive skinned Mediterranean or African descent is going to need longer in the sun. But that really like right around noon, as close to noon as you can get, it's good to get a few minutes of unprotected sun exposure. How do we balance that though? If you're going to the beach all day or a park, or you know what I mean? If you're going to be out all day, how do you do that? Well, first of all, vitamin D does not get through any sunscreen. So that's important to know. Like once you put it on, whether it's zinc based or whether it's chemical, although you're not going to use that anymore. Anyone listening here, right? Vitamin D is not getting through. So that's important to know, or well, some, right? Because nothing is 100% effective. So a little bit of vitamin D gets through. So if we're going to be out at the beach all day long, I'm not even going to worry about it. Sometimes I'll send my kids off to play for 15 minutes and call them back and then apply the sunscreen, right? That's like one step in the right direction. I think some of us are too afraid of sunshine. Right. And there we put on all the things. We put on all the sunscreen and the sun hats and the sun sleeves. So we need to find a balance again. The pendulum has swung a bit too far. We need to find a balance where we can have some unprotected sun exposure, but that we can also understand, how to protect ourselves without inviting cancer-causing chemicals into our system, in our ecosystem. We use a lot of shade. We traveled to Florida for spring break. I do have a rather pale skinned family. So that's coming from Michigan. The Michigan winter causes us all to be very, very light skinned. And to go to Florida in April, we know it's a huge risk for that. Like, there's no ramping up. It's an intense amount of sun right away. And so every day we'd go in for lunch and we'd stay inside from about noon to 2 and give our bodies a little rest, and for sure we used our sunscreens. My poor kids, for 10 years, every time we put sunscreen on, it's side A/B testing. So they always have to have 2 different sunscreens on in case one fails.
Oh my gosh.
Then I have a bit of data.
That is hilarious. So they put on one side of their body is one sunscreen, and on the second side, that is so funny.
So yes, it's a treat for them when I go, oh, kids, you can just wear one sunscreen today. They're like, yes. So standards. But anyway, so that's what we do. We would just remove ourselves from that intense sunlight right in the middle of the day, knowing that we had plenty of exposure with and without sunscreen for that vitamin D. And that actually reminds me, I mentioned that as SPF numbers have risen, it causes additional problems, right? As SPF numbers have risen, we see melanoma rates rising. And here's one reason why that may be at play. Because if you put on an SPF 50 or a 70 or 100, which the FDA thought about making illegal and didn't, bummer, but they have SPF 100 now. That makes people feel a false sense of security, right? If I'm putting on 50, I feel like I can be out all day. And sometimes I'm not wise enough to reapply, right? Your average person out there, but yet they feel invincible and they spend way too much time in the sun with this chemical sunscreen, which after 2 hours, we talked about that chemical reaction. Well, the chemical reaction degrades the sunscreen. Like the sunscreen has to go somewhere. It goes into the chemical reaction. It comes out as, these byproducts. And so within about 2 hours, this is why you're supposed to reapply. Petrochemical sunscreens are basically gone. They're basically non-existent. So families who aren't reapplying, but yet feel that invincibility, they're spending, again, way too much time in the sun, which could be one of the underpinnings of the increase in skin cancer. Cool fact about zinc oxide, it is not a chemical reaction, right? It is just sort of blocking the sun. It has a little bit of a heat byproduct and that's it. So it doesn't go anywhere. We've had times where we put zinc oxide on, legs and we're out camping. We don't shower. There's no soap out there. And the next day, you can still see it. You can still flick water at like our legs and it's still beating up. It's still, you can still see it. We've done testing where we'll like wash off one leg and leave the other leg and go out unexposed, unprotected in the sun. And we'll get a little bit more burned on one side than the other. Like zinc oxide does not disappear unless you rub it off, wipe it off, wash it off. Obviously, like natural daily living, right? Especially the face, and your kids are swimming or they're sweating. We do rub it off. You do still have to reapply, but it's nothing. It's magnitudes different than the reapplication needed for the chemical sunscreen, which is literally disappearing
into your bloodstream, into your system, into your
well
organs.
It's degrading. Right. The sun is making it degrade. If you want to put on sunscreen and sit inside your house, it's going to be fine. If you never are exposed to the sun, right, then it'll sit on and in your skin and you'll be protected the next day. But if you want to be in the sun, which is usually why we put on sunscreen, that chemical sunscreen is literally degrading and disappearing through that chemical reaction with the sun, whereas the zinc oxide isn't going anywhere.
Wow. Very, very interesting. That's a lot of information, but a lot of great, great information for people. So how about a quick recap on what to look for? I know you have a bunch of sunscreens in front of you, and I know that people can look on your website for all these recommendations. So, but give us a little recap, or what did we miss in this conversation?
Sure thing. So pick up a sunscreen, you flip it over, and you're going to look at the active ingredients in the drug facts box. By the way, the drug facts box means that it's actually been tested, right? So there are a lot of well-meaning little tiny brands out there who are making sunscreens and slapping an SPF on it. But if they don't have like the official drug facts box, it hasn't actually gone through official testing. So like you have to have some serious trust there in an individual. You look at the drug facts box, you look for the active ingredient. If it says zinc oxide, great, like pick it up, try it out. If you want to know if it actually goes on clear or, if it actually works, obviously look at Kitchen Stewardship, my website. A couple other things, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, then you're going to look for no parabens. That's really important. I like to see antioxidants in the sunscreen because obviously you're in the sun and there's going to be some oxidation. There's going to be some skin damage from the sun, no matter what you're wearing. And so what a great time to be putting on some antioxidants like green tea and buckthorn oil. And there's like a ton of them, raspberry seed oil, that are going to immediately help heal the oxidized cells. So that's something I look for. This one is Kokua. This one is formulated in Hawaii, and it has like 30 antioxidants in it, native to Hawaii. It goes on amazing as well. Third Rock is another really, really good one. It's formulated by a super smart chemist surfer dude. And it's very, very interesting. It uses a chelated form of zinc oxide. So it goes on a little differently, but very clear. That's kind of our family's new favorite. So there's all kinds of great mineral sunscreens because of the competition among brands and because of laws like we see in Hawaii. So the landscape is just getting easier and easier to have options for good ones, but you've got to be cautious of the greenwashing. Have
you ever thought about having your own sunscreen?
Oh, no.
too much work. You have enough on your plate right now, huh?
Physical products just sound like no fun as a business. I'm an educator. I like to teach. I like to dig into the research. I like testing things, but not quite that nitty gritty.
Well, people must love going on vacation with you because they know they don't even have to bring the sunscreen.
It's totally true. You get like a little educational session with Katie, and then I give out samples of sunscreen. Totally. That is real.
And they're part of your testing lab too, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
That is great. So did we miss anything? Anything else we wanted to touch on?
You know what? We didn't talk about UVA versus UVB, did we?
No, let's talk about that. That's really important.
We should. It's super important. And it was a huge miss for decades. Decades. Kills me. Okay. So the sun has UVA, UVB, UVC rays. The UVB is the one that gets all the press because it is the one that burns you. So you see the negative impact right away. UVA gets a good bit of press, especially among women, because that's your age, right? A for aging. So the UVA rays are the ones that are going to cause your wrinkles and your saggy, tight skin and whatever. UVA can cause some skin cancers. UVB is a huge culprit in skin cancers. UVC, the lesser known, also causes some skin cancers, right? So really we need to be protected from all of them if we're going to spend significant amount of time in the sun. And the chemical ingredients protect from one or the other. Okay, so oxybenzone, the one that's a huge hormone disruptor, estrogen mimicker, and is killing the coral reefs, it only protects from UVB. And in fact, all of the ingredients in sunscreens in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, except zinc oxide, only protected from UVB. So people could see that they worked, right? I put on sunscreen, I don't get burned. Oh my gosh, I missed a spot, I got burned there. Obviously my sunscreen works, right? Which is great if you only care about sunburn, but if you care about cancer,
right,
or aging,
excuse me.
Yeah, those ingredients did not protect you from UVA rays. And the FDA has just like sort of figured this out in about the last 10 years and has added, so if you look at any chemical sunscreen, you're now going to see an ingredient called avobenzone. That was not in anything really in 2010 when I started this work. Avobenzone protects from UVA rays, which is good and important and necessary. Now, zinc oxide is completely what's called broad spectrum, protects evenly from UVA and UVB rays by itself. It doesn't need any help. It doesn't need to be synergistically formulated, right, to have the balance where you're equally protected, whereas all these chemical ingredients do. And here's the fun fact about avobenzone. Totally stains your clothes.
Wow.
So it has to be in there if you're going to actually be protected from cancer. Again, was not in hardly any sunscreens in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. FDA did not mandate it. They didn't mandate broad spectrum. It was like that knowledge was not there. We didn't know what questions to ask. Zinc oxide did it naturally. So anyone using zinc oxide sunscreen was leaps and bounds ahead of the others as far as protection from cancer. But this avobenzone, my mom found this out the hard way. When it gets on your clothes, you can't see it right away until you wash it with soap. And then it looks like this like horrible orange rust colored stain that's impossible to get out. So, if you want to wreck all your laundry, buy the chemical stuff. Otherwise, zinc oxide's the way to go because it completely is broad spectrum all by itself. And that's why I don't love titanium dioxide as much, because it's not as evenly balanced broad spectrum. And it has some potential risks because it is a heavy metal. Right. So it's still, if I had the choice between titanium dioxide only sunscreen and the chemical junk, easy choice. But because there are so many that are using zinc oxide only so well, I just say, titanium's it's just the lesser of the two.
And the thing I talk about a lot in getting toxic chemicals out of your house, there's alternatives out there. Yes. You have to just pay attention and read and listen and look at where these alternatives are. Obviously, they're hard to find because these large sunscreen companies are bombarding us with their advertisements and telling us they're safe. But thanks to you, and thanks for your research and your kids and your husband and your family and friends, you have a long list of ones that you recommend. So I really appreciate you giving us your knowledge here today and sharing that information that I'm so looking forward to sharing with everybody else that follows me, and that I can push this information out there as well, Katie.
Awesome. Happy to help.